Good evening, everybody. The room is still filling up, but we will begin. I am Rachel Sklan. I'm the CEO of Masorti Judaism, and really pleased to see people from all over the Masorti community here this evening for our Israel briefing and update. We are pulling together as many different and diverse responses to what's going on in Israel as we can. I'd like to, first of all, there doesn't need introduction, our senior rabbi of the movement, rabbi of New North London, Rabbi Jonathan Wittenberg, who is at the heart of all of the goings on within the global Jewish community, and will be introducing and holding the evening this evening. Rabbi Jonathan, over to you.
Together we are stronger. That being isolated with our feelings is really, really hard at this time. And any opportunity to come together in community matters to us. One of the things our synagogues and the Masorti movement are doing, and Noam, our youth movement, are doing, is trying to get contact with people who may be feeling isolated, whether these are school pupils, whether they're students on campuses, people working where they've got no comradeship with other Jews, where they're meeting a wall of silence or hostility, and connect with them, because being together is much easier in these terrible times than feeling alone. So any links to people, together with their contact and permission to use it, is really helpful to us in reaching out. That's sort of by way of preamble. There are 3 parts to this evening online: a conversation between you, Jonathan, and Richard, when we found you, Richard, and then something sung, because music strengthens the spirit, and that will be turning to you, Yoav, and thank you. And then a conversation with 2 Israeli colleagues who are going to be joining a little bit later, Rabbi Idit Lev and Rabbi Natalie Lastreger, they're both in the north of Israel, and they're both friends and have stirring things to say about Am Yisrael Chai, the way the community is coming together in Israel. And after that, some more music, and then a report by Mandy Winston, who's the chief executive of the UJIA, which will be very much focused on what can we contribute. But the initial conversation will be between Jonathan and Richard. And Richard Miron, welcome and thank you. It's really your initiative, actually, this gathering, because you have worked both as a reporter, both as a spokesperson, and with UN, and you've worked for many years in Israel. You've also worked in the States. Now you're based in London, but you've had insights into Hamas and Hezbollah, which are very challenging, but you felt important for us to know. And I think I'll leave the 2 of you, Jonathan and Richard, to be in conversation with each other about really, it's really a kind of update of the politics of it and where it comes from. So over to the 2 of you, and I'll just mute myself and perhaps take me out.
Thank you, Rabbi Jonathan, and everyone who's gathered here. And Richard, I know it took some time to connect you, but as Rabbi Jonathan says, you have this unusual perspective because you're a correspondent on the ground with the BBC for quite a few years, and then was the spokesperson for the United Nations, UN, in Jerusalem. So you've been on both sides of this dynamic. And now this week you wrote something which was very striking, saying that obviously people are familiar with Hamas's strategy, from a tactic for many years, of suicide bombing. And I know you covered the impact of some of those suicide bombs. You were right there, and you wrote very movingly about that. But you wrote that now Hamas has itself become a suicide bomber. And I just think it's worth you explaining what you meant by that very sort of arresting metaphor.
Thanks, Johnny. And I look forward also to asking you questions about your perspective and some of the things that you've been writing about in the past week. My point was, and what I headlined it was by saying Hamas has become the suicide bomber and the suicide vest. And what I meant by that was that back in the days when I used to report, the suicide bomber would go in and commit their atrocity with a clear aim and understanding that they obviously were not going to survive, but they served the cause they believed in, and the cause was partly to create chaos. I began covering Hamas in Israel in late '95, early 1996, and one of the formative reporting experiences that I had was reporting on the 2 number 18 buses that were blown up within the space of a week with 45 people killed. That event managed to derail and cause upheaval in the Israeli political sphere, resulted in Shimon Peres, who became the prime minister upon Yitzhak Rabin's assassination, losing the election to Bibi Netanyahu, and it led to weakening also the Palestinian Authority. And taking that, I basically have extrapolated that. And so, you know, Hamas has done that on a much larger scale. Last week, it's committed a huge, as we know, a huge atrocity, which it knowingly invited its own destruction from Israel. Israel has no option but to destroy it, and is going to go about and do that. Why would it do that was part of my question, when Hamas is in pretty firm control, or was in pretty firm control of the Gaza Strip. It was getting money from Qatar. There was a working accommodation in a way with Israel, that as long as you keep the order there, we won't kind of step in and try and oust you or anything like that in the Gaza Strip. The PA was weakening in the West Bank. So why did it do it? It did it, in my opinion, because we all collectively misread it. The West believed that Hamas could be moderated. I'm being told that I have poor sound. I hope that's not throughout. I hope everybody can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you well, actually. But so I think that's you keep going.
Okay. My belief was that it did it because, like the individual suicide bomber, it wanted to create considerable chaos, and it believed, the movement itself, that it would sacrifice itself towards this end. We all misread it. The West, as I say, believed that Hamas could be moderated, and I saw that in action when I was at the UN. And
you mean your colleagues at the UN believed that Hamas was on a more moderate track that would lead to them being people you could do business with?
Yeah, and they kind of put out little feelers behind. You know, I was at one event where my very senior UN official was literally in a choreographed position where he would happen to pass Hamas, who was in the building for a regular meeting, because they would not meet them at the senior level, and he would happen to see them, and they would do a handshake as a means of trying to engage with them. That was the beginning. And I was standing in that same corridor when that happened, right? And so that was just, a very small illustration of that. At the same time, Israel believed, as I say, that it could be contained. What they failed to realize, and after the fact, I guess I include myself amongst this, is that Hamas, has its aspiration always been an Islamic state from the river to the sea. And everybody took this as a kind of, a distant aspiration, but it wasn't. It was its game plan. And it's done that because what it believes, by doing this, what it has done, I believe, in last week, is to blow up the organization, destabilize the whole region. We might very well have a two-front war and heaven knows what, and upend the politics of the whole region. There are arrested populations throughout the Middle East. We're already seeing the ripples of what is going on there with Israel's response to these atrocities. So that is my thesis. And in that sense, I think Hamas is acting like a rational actor within its own sphere. And the only thing I can say is that it's extremely dangerous. I can't predict that. None of us can what's going to happen from this point.
So why don't I just talk for 30 seconds, purely just so you can fiddle with the sound settings on your machine, because several people are saying that they wonder if you can do anything about the sound. So I'll just respond to that a bit while you see if there's anything that can be fiddled with. I mean, the logic of it is, of course, what you're arguing there is predicated on the idea that there will be a response that will be so massive that it leads to Hamas's disappearance as an organization, that they will indeed be eradicated. That is the stated goal. The IDF and the government say the goal is to wipe Hamas off the face of the earth. I have wondered whether that is achievable, because even physically, whether you can actually get everybody, I wonder. And secondly, I wonder if it is achievable even in conceptually, because it is in some ways an idea, and it will take root in the imaginations and minds of the next generation, who will be further embittered by the response that is coming in the next few days. And therefore, it will recruit yet another generation of Hamas people. And so therefore I do have wondered if this eradication notion is actually illusory. You can never eradicate an organization like this. But in a way, that was the sort of premise of your argument, which is that Hamas is going to remove itself from the picture because it has its eye on an even bigger prize, which is throwing the entire region into kind of turbulence, from which I suspect you'll tell me they think Israel might disappear. That's the big long-term goal, that there'll be a big war, Hezbollah in the north, themselves in Gaza, and the upshot might be what? That as they see it, Israel collapses, is defeated. What? How do they see that piece of the goal?
I hope everybody can hear me, and I'm just checking.
Oh, much better now.
Yeah. Right. Okay. I think there's two different perspectives here. When you're dealing with an organization like Hamas, its time frame is completely different from the perspective of other people. It's not thinking in 5 or 10 years, and democratic Western societies think in these cycles of 5 or 10 years or 20 years or so on. It's not thinking that Israel's downfall is going to happen in 10 years or 20 years. It is patient. It has proven its patience. I believe that this plan has been coming for quite a long time, for decades indeed. And it doesn't expect Israel to collapse tomorrow or next year. What it believes in is that in incremental steps, in slowly but surely upending the reality. And I used that initial example back in '95 of the suicide bombings. Well, that whole, if you will, that equation has been it's been changed exponentially. We had almost 2,000, we think, terrorists rampaging throughout the Gaza envelope last week. It didn't think that Israel would crumble when it did this. It didn't think that. And it doesn't think that Israel is going to disappear tomorrow, but it does think that this is a step on creating, just as you intimated there, Johnny, creating greater upheavals, sending the ripples throughout the region. And I believe potentially also inviting Hezbollah, and this is to participate in an unfolding conflict, which we may indeed be witnessing now. Obviously, this is supposition, some of this on my part. I've also spent time with Hezbollah, both in the southern suburbs of Beirut, and I have been to South Lebanon and seen it, and seen how Hezbollah has been preparing for many years for a forthcoming war. I was there in, I would say, let me just work this one out, about 2000, last time I was there was about 2011, and they were rebuilding all the villages that had been hit after the Second Lebanon War. And I was with the UN. My Lebanese UN guide was saying to me, Hezbollah has been rebuilding the roads, right? Mm-hmm. And they believed also it was rebuilding, it was putting in stuff like fiber optic cables, so an independent communication system, right? And so whilst it was rebuilding inside places like Bint Jebel, which I went to, I think it was building a military, there's no doubt it was building a military infrastructure. And I can only tell you that when we went into these places, Hamas, according to the ceasefire, was not meant to be visible or anything like that. Everywhere we went, there were these motorbikes that would circle us, and they were Hezbollah. Hezbollah were everywhere. They were completely in control of that territory, and I believe they've been preparing for decades for a conflict. Whether that will be now or I don't know.
Yeah. Sorry. Let me just come in with a thing. I mean, the common element here is kind of strategic patience that both have, Hamas and Hezbollah. If they've been planning for this, is there a risk that Israel, which everybody agrees has no option but to act and to respond, is walking into a trap that has been quite meticulously and methodically, patiently laid, which is they have performed these truly heinous acts, sadistic and cruel atrocities deliberately to get Israel so angry, Israelis' public opinion so filled with rage that Israel cannot help itself. It goes right in there into a Gaza Strip that is in effect one huge booby trap that it will ensnare the Israeli personnel who go in on the ground. That, it's already very hard to fight a guerrilla war in other people's territory. Everyone knows that from the Vietnam War and other things. This is exactly, in other words, exactly what they want. They go in, And as one sort of trap goes round the ankles of Israel, and then another one on the other leg, at that point, when Israel is trapped, Hezbollah strikes in the north. And Israel is doing exactly what its enemies, nobody's arguing it's got any other option, by the way, but Israel is doing what its enemies want. Is that the upshot of the analysis that you've laid out?
The short answer to that is yes. But I think Israel has no option by the same token. And I know that you've discussed this on your podcast, Johnny, with Yonit Levy, one of Israel's leading broadcasters, in which Yonit said that Israel had to prove deterrence, not just to its enemies in the region, but also to its own population. Because if it does not act, I mean, maybe you want to relay that conversation of what Yonit said.
Well, this is the Unholy podcast that Yonit and I do, and we did an episode that was posted or dropped or whatever on Friday, in which she was voicing with great sort of feeling and intensity how Israelis are feeling. She's become this kind of vessel for the country's grief because she's on air 5 hours a night and she's interviewing the families and the survivors and really hearing it all. And what the sort of undertow in it is this terrible feeling of abandonment and fear that many Israelis feel, which is that they, in those hours, they weren't protected. This is not a new point. Obviously, a lot of people have been hearing this. That in those immediate hours, they were calling and waiting for the army, and nothing was happening. And therefore, Israel, the idea for domestic reassurance purposes has to act and be seen to act, because people will need to be reminded and want to be reminded that they have an army to protect them. So that's a whole other thing going on. The other complication, of course, is the hostages. Can they go in as forcefully as they might have done years ago? Very difficult when you've got hostages there on Gazan territory. That will obviously impede the extent to which Israel is free to act. Karen Lewin asks, what about the tunnels they have built under Gaza, presumably the they being Hamas? That's another complication as well, Richard.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a military person, and all I know is, by the way, I should add here, my nephew, who I'm close to, is preparing to go into Gaza. He's a soldier, and he is very prepared. He's in an elite unit, and he's very prepared for whatever confronts him. And I think that they will have been briefed about the presence of tunnels. There are endless miles of tunnels underneath. Clearly, I haven't seen them. And this is a day that Hamas has been preparing for a long time. But as you said, Johnny, I think that the options for Israel are limited in this regard. It has to go in, and I think it goes in knowing that it is willing to take a loss of life, because so much life has been lost to this point, that Israelis have bled so much in the past week that only I say this with enormous trepidation. Only the shedding of further blood will be necessary to bring this to a close. And please God, as little as possible. And I mean that also of Palestinian civilians, by the way. But I think there is an understanding within Israel generally that they have to do this, and the cost may indeed be high, but they are left with few options. And I believe that they're going to try and degrade Hamas as much as they possibly can. I don't know what will term victory on this, and the day after, I've been turning it over in my mind what the scenarios are assuming once, and I believe it will be once, the Israeli army has crushed Hamas, what then happens? And I think we're into a bit of conjecture about that. I know that Johnny, you and I have got somewhat limited time.
We have. So I was going to say we have got limited time, probably a couple more minutes. So just to close it out, this next phase we're going into, you said there's going to be loss of life on the Israeli side and among Palestinians, including civilians. You're somebody who's worked in two of the organizations that, the Jewish community has, we can say, mixed feelings about, namely the BBC and the UN, but they're emblematic of, in a way, world opinion. What's your read of the patience the rest of the world will have for the operation that we now think is beginning, imminently, especially when it does lead to the kind of loss of life that you are envisaging? And I would just offer this sort of thought. There does seem a disconnect where, on the one hand, world leaders, Joe Biden and others, Rishi Sunak are saying, green light, do what it takes. Israel's got the right to defend itself. Even Labour spokespeople here saying the same, even when they're questioned about international law, as David Lammy was this morning, saying, yeah, Israel's got the right to defend itself. How long does that position endure when the death toll starts rising in Gaza? I mean, Yonit on the Unholy podcast said Israel is aware that, unlike the United States when it took on ISIS, it has America standing over its shoulder with a stopwatch, meaning you've got limited time. So what's your read of that, of how long the patience of the rest of the world is for Israel to do this operation, and maybe try and keep it quite brief because we need to hand over to to Rabbi Jonathan and the others taking part.
I think you put your finger on it. I think it's going to be what I couldn't put an actual date on it. I think it depends on the numbers of casualties, Palestinian casualties on the ground, and the pictures that are going to be coming out of there. I think you're absolutely right that the world, and you in your piece in The Guardian intimated kind of in a way how the world sees Jews, or how we feel also. But the world has much less patience for what Israel does than it did for America. I was in Afghanistan and I saw what happened when American planes dropped bombs on villages by mistake, and whole villages were wiped out, frankly. You know, it doesn't happen that way with Israel. Everything that happens there's a camera no more than a few feet away. This conflict is a lightning rod for passions that none of us, I think, here can fully understand why that is. And there's something about us, the Jews, involved in that. There's something about East versus West. There's all sorts of things. But there isn't much patience. Israel has been given on an official level on the side of the West as a fair bit. There's 2 American warships in the Eastern Mediterranean, I think, by now. There's a Royal Navy vessel too. And I think, and Johnny, I think you know too, that, NATO's been briefed on this. Israel's been given as much as possible, a wide window. But as seen yesterday in London, and will be seen around the world, there are going to be mass protests. And at some point, politicians in Paris and London and Berlin are going to start getting jumpy. And therefore, I think that the window is not big. And that is why whatever happens is going to happen very soon. And the pictures, and it's not, obviously, war is, having seen war up close, war is a terrible, terrible, terrible thing. It is one of the worst things you can imagine. And the pictures are going to be equally terrible. But war is like that. And those pictures they're going to reverberate around the globe, and they're going to limit what Israel, they're going to put a stopwatch. But the bottom point line here is, I don't think Israel's paying any attention to that stopwatch. It's going to do what it has to do. I think its view is it's working on, to some degree, its own clock, but the international community is working on a slightly different one.
Lots more we could talk about. I think we should probably have to end it there, but people can see Richard Miron's piece that appeared in the Times of Israel, I think, the one about the Hamas and its strategy. You can read that there, and obviously we're all hoping for better news, but for sobering note. But I think we'll wrap it up there, and back to you, Rabbi Jonathan.
Thank you. As you said, a very sobering note, and I think many of us feel, and across Israel and across the Jewish world, a profound connection with Israel, concern for hostages, a shared grief, a shared shock, and a deep concern for what will happen next, both for the lives of soldiers. You mentioned your nephew. Many, many people on this call will have family involved, and we just wish people, please God, this is as least bad as it can be. And across the Jewish community, I've heard voices saying, and we have no war with the citizens of Gaza who are caught up in this, want nothing to do with Hamas, are in a way the victims of Hamas and hostages in a different kind of way to Hamas as well. So I think our prayers are really, for what happens, please God, it be as least bad as it can. Yoav, I think between these different parts, something sung, and now also Rabbis Natalie Elastinrega has joined us, and Edith Lev as well. So Edith, thank you, and Natalie as well will bring you to the screen. Richard, Jonathan, Thank you, and every strength to everybody. Yoav, something sung, and then it'll be over to, I'll be welcoming Edith and Natalie. And thank you very much for joining us from Israel. Yoav. Ken, we can't yet hear you, so yeah, please.
Eli, Eli, שלא ייגמר לעולם, החול והים, ריש רוש של המים, ברק השמיים, תפילת האדם, החול והים, ריש רוש של המים. ברק השמיים, תפילת האדם.
Thank you, Yoav. A really buchot habaot, a really double warm welcome to you, Rabbis Edith Lev and Natalie Lastreger. It's very aware that in very difficult circumstances, you've taken the trouble to join us here in a call which is across the UK of Masorti communities and colleagues. And thank you very much. Just to welcome you, Rabbi Edith, I've got to know you over the past year. You have a responsibility for connection with the Rabbinical Assembly, which is the organization of Masorti rabbis worldwide. And you've been particularly with the responsibility for Israel and for Europe. So we've met in Berlin, we've met in Israel, we've met in near London, and have a real appreciation and respect for how much you care for all of us. And Rabbi Natalie, we spoke just last week on an international call, and each of you said something which has really moved me, and I want to ask you about it. And Rabbi Natalie, what you said to me is we need oz v'anava, strength and humility. And those words have so stayed with me, because it's not often, anava, humility, is not often the word people couple with oz, strength. And I wanted to ask you more about that, and also to tell us what it's like where you are in Kvar Veradim, which is pretty far north, in case people don't know. And Edith, Rabbi Edith, you said, and I've heard you say several times, really, Am Yisrael Chai, that the government may have failed its country, but the people of Israel, and I hope one would include the Jewish people, have not, and that there's an enormous communal solidarity articulated and expressed in all kinds of ways. So maybe I'll just begin with just asking you, Natalie, what is it like where you are? And tell us how you understand that very, very striking and very, very important oz va'anava.
So good evening, everybody. I am sitting in my office in my home, which is nearly 8 kilometers from the Lebanon frontier. And in the app of the siren, I have 0 seconds to move from where am I to the shelter if a siren comes. So if a siren comes and in a second you will not see me, it's because of this. In Haifa, Rabbi Edith has 1 minute, I think.
1 minute and a half.
1 minute and a half. So I have 0 seconds. And it's really something that come to my mind, which is a כי רגע באפו חיים ברצונו. And 1 second, what can happen in 1 second if in the next second I will not be in the shelter? I was most of my life in Jerusalem. I came to Kfar Vradim 8 years ago to become the rabbi of the Masorti congregation here. A very nice place, beautiful view. The air is clear, but מצפון תיפתח הרעה, as our prophet said that from the north, all the bad things, הרעה, the most bad event will come from the north. We in this place used to say מצפון תיפתח התקווה, the hope, because we have a very special and unique relationship with our brother and sister, the Christian, the Druze, the Muslims in the Galil. And today we have a lot of missiles who come just 3-4 kilometers from my house. So we decided that our weekly lesson, Tanakh, will be at home from Zoom because of the we don't know what we come. We hope that not the bad and the horrible nightmare that so many people are afraid from. I am not naive. My son, my elder son, is almost a doctor in Gaza with all other doctor. He's a commander, and is really near of all the tragic and horrible things that happened there. Nobody, not only young men, should see what they saw those days, not the bodies, not the situation of the bodies. They collect thousands of bodies, the families. This is not something that we as parents want our children be involved in. That's the situation. So I have one in the south and one in the north also. She's not in the field, but also in Miluim, reserve. And in Kfar Vradim, we have a lot of patriot people. We have family with 2, 3, 4 kids in the army now. We have one of the middle daughter of one of our congregants. She is missing. She was in this famous party, Romi Gonen. Her mother, one of the head of the new group of parents who are making something to bring them children back. So it's close to each of us. If it's not a family, it's a friend of family. If it's not our children, it's friend of our children, my children. I have 3. Until today, we are 1 week from this. I have no word to say how to describe this event. They, 3 of them together, assist 7 funerals. or friend, brother, sister, friend. So we are not in the beginning of the end of this horrible situation. And what I said, that when in Simchat Torah, I am not talking on the phone on Shabbat, and I was disconnect from the news. And when I arrived to the synagogue last Shabbat, in Simchat Torah, people start to arrive, and then I'm sorry, I have to answer. I'm so sorry.
You do that. I'll come to Edith.
Thank you, Shia.
Edith, we probably have another 5 or 6 minutes, the three of us together. So just, you really talked about the solidarity shown by Israel. It's important to us to hear that. But you say whatever you wish to tell us.
On Saturday morning, one of the things that wasn't there was the army, but it's not only the army. It's like, and I'm using like intentionally. The government is not there. The government is in shock, and they're still not there. They shut down the education system, and nobody, and there is no answer for kids who on special education children who it's really hard for them because they're already after 2 weeks of vacation at home. Even in places that it's quiet, it's still not there. So, and all kinds of things like some of the places that were under attack, they got evacuated by the Israeli government, but some of them are not. So people needs to find their own, place that was attacked, it's under fire, and still the government of Israel is thinking, oh, should we evacuate Sderot or shouldn't we? Are we going to put the money on that or not? And on the other hand, you see in ours, the organizations that are part of being that are leading the social the protest against the reform in the courts, just changed what they're doing and started working for these people. You have volunteers everywhere doing a lot of things, and it's really amazing because it is replacing what the government is not doing. And it's very hard. We see now the consequences of having so many elections, and also getting people that are not the right people to be the CEO of all kinds of government ministries and stuff like that. One of the problem is that this government is appointing people because they're close to them, they're politically the right on the right agenda, but not with the right skills to be a CEO of a government ministry. And that's a huge problem. And again, at the same time, I think that, one of the things that Natalie mentioned is that from the beginning, the government was like, for the first few days, she hasn't done anything about who is missing. So the first 48 hours, the government is doing nothing about, collecting data and stuff like that. But on Sunday morning, people already built this. People, not social organizations, but high-tech people from Israel build this website to collect the data. And they have this amazing organization now working for helping getting all these kidnapped people back home. And the government is only starting to build its own operation from yesterday. And it's called Israel Arabim Ze Lazeh. We are there for one another. And I have to say that if we weren't, then nobody else would be there for us.
Yeah, it's very chastening to hear that. And I hope that later on we'll hear from Mandy Winston, who's coordinating support from the UK, where people are feel very much part of the community of Israel, but of course we're not there like you are, but still we want to be, to make our contribution to the family of Israel. Thank you, Rabbi Idit. We're going to run out of sort of time soon, but Natalie, you made this, very brave statement about Oz. We need strength, clearly, but also anava. I just wanted to understand that a bit more deeply from you. If you can let Natalie unmute, Abigail. Thank you. Thank you.
Excuse me, it was one of example, it was the head of the security municipality department here. So, and they ask for, again, government, no government things, to use our shul, our synagogue, to put 40 soldiers there to simply sleep there. From tomorrow, we will have, I will go after I will finish here and prepare our synagogue to be able to host a soldier, because they have no place to be and it's raining outside. So, well, it's another things. And another email that I received, it's about the tahara that we should do or not do for the 1,000 of people who die. And this is the Ozen as an avad that I'm talking about. In one hand, we have to look at the situation and say, Al tira avdi Yaakov, don't be afraid. Al techat Israel. We were in such bad situation in the past. We have this historic, huge baggage of disaster all over, and we get up and continue. So Al tira avdi Yaakov, don't, this is the oz, this is the strength that we have to be able to be feeling. But in the other hand, and this is something that it's afraid, I'm afraid from, the anava that we saw people are talking about, what we should do, what we have to do, why we are not doing this or this, without any humility, any moment of thinking about the day after, not coming from rage, but oz ve'anava. Anava, it's not being weak, it's being compassion. It's be in the place of human fragility that we should have in those moments also. And in this horrible morning of Simchat Torah, we get to sing two things only with the akafot, and Aderet ve'emunah, we don't get there. We didn't get to sing this piyut. Oz ve'anava. I'm getting out from Simchat Torah and wrote some things to my congregant, and I said, we have to hold these strengths that we have. You have abroad. The fact that I'm talking with you, it's giving me strength. It's feel me in hugs that I'm sure if I was in front of you, you will give me. And in another hand, I hope that our commander in the army, in the government, has also the humility that Israel used to have in front of huge moments, to think a little bit more wide than only the instinct of the moment. So let's pray to have also the oz, but the anava and humility and capacity to hold both of them together.
Thank you, both of you. Edith, we're going to have to move on in a minute, but Edith, let's have a moment's word from you as well. It's extremely moving and very important for us to hear you. Thank you.
Do you want something specific or just?
Well, just a closing comment from you as well. I realize you've had less of the time, and I apologize.
No, I just want to say, these are really, really hard times. I don't think that anybody, I mean, we thought that we are over these big wars. And it's frightening to think about what is coming up ahead. Even if nothing happens on the military frontier, just handling all these broken families and getting all these people back home. And I really want to thank you for being here with us and thinking of us. This is not something that we take lightly. And I want to say I've talked today with somebody from these family organizations to bring back their loved ones. And they are going to be asking things from us and from you as well. And I will be the contact person to get the request to you. But just so you know that they are counting on all of us to help them.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Edith Lev. Thank you, Rabbi Natalie Lastreger. And really, definitely virtually hugs from us. And you're very, very moving and very important for us to hear you. And I hope we will hear you again. All strength and all thoughts and from us with you. I'm going to go to Yoav again to sing something, and then we're going to hear just for 5 minutes from Mandy Winston, who's the chief executive of UJIA, one of the core Jewish organizations here in Britain, about what things we can do to help. And it looks like you'll be coming to us with more thoughts as well. And then we'll conclude with a prayer and with Hatikva. Yoav, over to you. Thank you very much.
And while it's really hard to sing and to be hopeful in these times, I do want to sing Shir LaShalom, a song for peace. תנו לשמש לעלות, לבוקר להאיר, הזעקה שבתפילות אותנו לא תחזיר. איש אשר קבע נרו ובעפר נטמן, בכי מר לא יאירון, לא יחזירו לכאן. איש אותנו לא יאיר מבור תחתית אפל, כאן לא יועילו לא שמחת הניצחון ולא שירי הלל. לכן רק שירו שיר לשלום, אל תלחשו תפילה, מוטב תשירו שיר לשלום בצעקה גדולה. דו 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 do 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 do.
Thank you again, Yoav. I often think of the verse Ozi v'zimwatia. My strength is also my music. Thank you. Thank you. Mandy, I hope we can find you. I know that you've joined from one call to another. Just to say that we have put, the Masorti movement and my synagogue, the New North London, has the details of the appeal through the UJIA and several other central appeals on it. And Michael Uyghur, chief executive of the Board of Deputies of British Jews, said, as a Jew, there are two things we have to do at this time. One of them is to be in touch with all our colleagues, friends, and family in Israel. And the other is to give. And if we don't do that, we're failing our duty as Jews. There's just 5 minutes. If you just tell us the core of what you're doing and the core of the ways we can respond. Thank you very much, because you're from dawn to dusk and beyond all night, you're on call.
Thank you, Rabbi Jonathan. And I also want to say, as a member of New North London Synagogue and as a British Israeli, the space that has been provided in your synagogue for coming together and reflection and mourning has been so important for me and so many other people. I'm going to talk about the needs on the ground in Israel, not only from a UJIA perspective, and I'm coming at this not only as an Israeli who lived many years in Israel, but also because my professional background is in disaster response. And the thing that I was always dreading was when we would be called upon to do something similar in Israel. I thought it would be an earthquake. It's not. It's an atrocity which really we don't have the words to describe. But let me talk about the situation in Israel from a perspective of what's happening in civil society. And civil society in Israel is amazing. It is like no other country in the world. And if the first 2 days after the events on Shabbat, people were in shock, there is a most enormous mobilization happening. And that impacts the way that we should think about what we should do. So the first thing I want to say is that the needs are rapidly changing. And there is a process of different NGOs, we are one of them, who are assessing needs on the ground really many times a day to make sure that the resources can meet the most urgent needs. So what I'm going to say now about what the emergency needs are at this moment in time could change as the days unfold, though I do believe we're going to be in an emergency situation for possibly a few weeks. I mean, the first thing is around medical supplies. For first responders and medical centers that are key trauma centers, organizations like Magen David Adom, United Hatzolah, Zaka, and the hospitals in Israel all doing incredible work and are very worthy causes. But there are other issues which are emerging. One is around evacuation and housing for families who are in the south and in the north, in particular for those who wish to leave but are not being evacuated by the government. So actually this weekend, bizarrely, one of the things that we were doing were providing games, toys, clothing, and hygiene products for a group of people who have come out of Israel and are currently in London. But that is also true for people in Israel itself. And that means that basic needs are required. Food, clothing, supplies for families that ran out with the clothes on their back, and those that remain in their communities but are still under fire. And I think the most important populations to remember in that, everybody in Israel is traumatized. You can hear it from our colleagues talking here. There is not a person I have spoken to who isn't undergoing some kind of trauma. And for me, really, I don't think I have felt that degree of trauma since I worked in Haiti after the earthquake in 2010, where 300,000 people lost their lives in one day. So this is an extraordinary moment, and the trauma relief care that we need to provide for people who've been affected, for soldiers who are going to be coming out of and who are already out of Kfar Aza, who are identifying bodies, lone soldiers who don't have families, but also new olim, people who don't have the tools to be able to fully comprehend. They haven't lived through this multiple times. And also I want to mention non-Jewish communities. We spoke today with the CEO of a social impact program that we fund in the Bedouin community, where one of their people, they train people to have high-tech skills so they can have good jobs. One man lost 4 members of his family in one day. So we also have to remember this is affecting all Israelis, and not even though this pogrom obviously was targeted at Jews. We also expect that there's going to be many needs in the long term. So I think our thinking tends to be around emergency, but this is not going away. And there are a few things that we're hearing directly from the highest sources in Israel that I wanted to share today. One is, please donate money and do not donate goods. It is much more efficient to give money. So for example, we pushed out money on Thursday night so families in shelter could have food. It makes everybody feel really good that they're donating goods, but it actually isn't what's needed. That's one thing that people need to do in terms of giving, and to make sure you give to responsible organizations And there's already the first instances being reported of fraud. There is a good long list on the JLC, the Jewish Leadership Council website, that lists the main organizations that have a arm in Israel that is constantly assessing needs and infrastructure to push that out. We are one of them. There are others. And the other thing that I would say is that this is going to be a long haul, and the needs in Israel are going to require us to support for a long time. And we wish that this would go away. I think we are all grieving, and we wake up in the morning feeling like we have lost somebody in that moment of grief. But this is going to require not only resilience in Israel, but also resilience from this community here as we deal with the impact of this in the long term, and not only today and tomorrow.
Thank you very much. And just underline that point, that to give money and not goods, and that we have a duty to give. In the light of what you said, I just want to mention some things we're learning, which is we're working on what more spaces can be open for young people so that they feel together and have solidarity and feel safe. How can we connect more deeply with Israel and communities there? And also the request not just to pray for people who, in general, for hostages, but also to name names and to be specific and to indicate, that closer care. I really want to thank everybody and everybody who's joined. Our hearts are really with you. And I think the best thing we can do with our own anxiety is to contribute, to be part of community, to help make that community here and in Israel and wherever it's needed. And not to forget the importance at really difficult time also of our relationship with non-Jewish communities in Israel and here as well. I'm going to just say a short prayer and then ask Yoav to conclude with the Hatikva. This is just something I wrote. Our hearts and prayers are with everyone grieving for murdered relatives and friends in Israel, across the world, including our own community. Our intense and heartfelt prayers are for the hostages, small children, old people, a woman who came on the kinder transport, and for their desperate families. You mentioned Romi Gonen just now, Natalie, who's in our prayers. May God, who teaches that no one is more vulnerable than a hostage, and that Pidyon Shvu'im, the redemption of captives, takes precedence over every other cause, bring about their speedy release and safe return home. We pray for everyone wounded and traumatized, for the medical teams caring for them, for those arranging logistics and care, for everyone in Israel and across the world supporting others in their pain and anguish. Our prayers are with Israel's soldiers, for their safety in what will now ensue in the battle against Hamas, and for an absolute minimum of casualties. Our prayers for human life have no political borders. We pray for the ordinary people of Gaza helplessly caught up in this war, who want nothing to do with terrorism, but only safety, a future and life. May they find safe refuge, food and water. Israel is at war with Hamas, not with them. We pray for safety for all our communities across the world. We pray for a better future for everyone. One day soon. Hashta Bagala Venomar. Amen. We'll conclude with Hatikva.
נפש יהודי הומייה ולפת מזרח קדימה עין לציון סופיה עוד לא עבדה תקוותנו, התקווה בת שנות 2000 להיות עם חופשי בארצנו ארץ ציון וירושלים להיות
עם חופשי בארצנו ארץ ציון וירושלים.
Well, come on, say. Thank you.
Thank you, all of you.
Thank you. We will keep our contact with you. And to everybody, what can one say? May it be, well, we'll say shalom b'momav.